Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Bionicle Inspiration series. This episode is going to be on body types. Had a few requests for this one, so here you go. Essentially, what we're going to cover is all the different types of body types, whether you got yourself a sort of slimmer looking mock or a really bulky mock, whatever. We're going to kind of cover the whole spectrum there. So, may as well just jump right on in. The first mock that we have today is by Ben, otherwise known as Crow, and this mock is called Drae, I believe. Maybe pronouncing it wrong, but it's kind of a staple of when I say the names on different mocks, so continuing tradition. What I really like about this mock is, first of all, the really awesome elbow design he's got here. He's used some of these sort of ratchet clicky pieces, and given the fact that this is a more slim, skinnier mock, really works to use that part because it is such a thin, small piece, and it really blends nicely and fits together with everything here. Because I imagine if you wanted to have a sort of larger mock, you'd need maybe one or two of those parts to have everything flow nicely together, but you can very easily just use one piece like that here and achieve a very nice looking result that is also extremely posable and also would hold everything quite nicely together like you wouldn't, unless the actual ratchet is quite flimsy, but that would just be a very rare occurrence. The arm would be able to hold itself up as well, which is often a pro if you've got some heavier weapons or something. So first off, that's a really cool elbow that really lends itself to this overall design. Another thing that's really cool, he kind of has this really nice sort of ninja aesthetic, which I've seen a lot on various different mocks. So a lot of people often like to go with this sort of ninja style. And it actually lends itself very nicely to using less pieces in a way. For example, a lot of this mock is very non-custom. You look at the bottom legs here, it's just a simple traditional lower leg piece with a couple additional parts on there. And even the waist itself, you could technically make that custom, but it is just the same sort of thing. One of the traditional pieces with a few additional things put on there. But it really doesn't hinder the overall design. It still looks awesome. It's extremely posable, which is such a awesome thing, especially because of that sort of ninja aesthetic. He's able to pull off a lot of poses, you can see in a lot of these images. Yeah, using a lot of the non-custom parts also lends itself to that. They are designed because, Bionicles are toys, they're designed to be super posable. So if you have a few issues with posability on mocks, I often recommend that, just slapping on some non-custom parts there. It'll save you money, it'll save you time, all that sort of stuff. And you also get some really cool abilities to pose with it, which is awesome. But yeah, I think that really lends itself to using and creating a sort of slimmer design, which looks awesome on this mock and is a great example of that. Another thing that I quite like about this mock, this maybe isn't the best example of it, but I was talking to someone and they were saying how a lot of the new G2 masks, especially those from the original wave, a lot of the masks are just really small. Like, for example, Onawa's mask, even though he is a bulkier guy, is actually a really, really tiny mask. And I have a mock that I built and I was showing it to a friend and they were saying that they liked everything about it except it used the Onawa G2 mask and he felt that it didn't quite work on the mock because it's just a small mask. It just sort of seemed a little out of place. So building a sort of skinnier frame for a mock would definitely help to be able to use some of those masks. And I know a lot of you guys always say that you mainly have newer Bionicle pieces because of, G2 and everything, and you kind of have a bit more easy access to that sort of stuff. So yeah, building a skinnier mock rather than say a bulkier mock or any other type of frame, I mean, there's all sorts of different types, body types you could build. Definitely doing a sort of slimmer style would be a lot more beneficial to just create a nice overall sense of flow, and you can more easily use that style of mask because it'll just naturally fit the overall vibe and everything. Another cool thing about Crow's mock here, or Ben's mock, whatever you want to call him, there's a lot of cool shots where he shows off various different weapon designs and stuff. And I know a lot of people love to have thousands of different weapons on their mock. And I say do it. It always looks cool to showcase off all sorts of different weapons and stuff. And again, that sort of lends itself to this ninja aesthetic that this mock has. So great work, Crow. Some very awesome designs here and some awesome poses with these weapons too. Looks great. The next mock we have is by Ao Okononen and is called Tongu. Now this is actually his self mock. Does look a little bit like Tongu. I'm not sure if there's a resemblance there or not. I personally don't know enough about the mock, but he still looks super awesome. One thing that I think is very cool. Oh, well, before we start talking about Tongu, I definitely want to say that, of course, we're talking about bulky mocks for this body type here, or just sort of larger builds, stockier builds, that sort of thing. And one thing that I think this mock showcases very well, and sort of lends itself to having a sort of bigger frame and stuff like that, is it has such an awesome finger design. Again, actually using those ratchet joints that we were talking about before with the elbow joints in Crow's Mock. And I think that's really cool because it creates a very posable and awesome looking finger design, which is naturally quite a large design, and it just probably would not work very well on a slimmer mock like we were seeing before. So building a bigger, larger mock really allows you to play around with a lot more parts to use for posable fingers. And finger designs are often so fun to do and awesome to have. And being able to branch out and use different styles and stuff is really, really cool. And having a big bulky mock like this really lends itself to that. You could even do some stuff with some of the mixel joints for fingers. A couple other people have done that before, which again, it lends itself to being on a bigger, bulkier mock rather than a slimmer mock. Another thing that this mock very effectively does, English, something that this mock does very effectively is uses some bigger parts to really cover things. Again, given that the mock is just naturally bigger, you're able to use a lot of larger parts in more effective ways. So, for example, these sort of Borak shells in Keat Orange, or what do they call it on Bricklink? Bright. I'll put it up in post, whatever it is. I always call it Keat Orange just because of Tongu. And I know a couple other people I talk to do as well. So actually, hey, let me know in the comments. What do you call that color? Do you just call it yellow? Do you call it Keat Orange? Do you call it bright orange? I think it's bright orange, isn't it? You'll see in a sec. But anyway, yeah, using those Borak shields in that color covers quite a lot of the mock and also gets a really nice sort of shape and texture on there, which looks fantastic. What's so good about that is it actually covers up a lot of the mock, which should be great because I'm sure if you flipped up those parts, they'd probably just be bare bones and skeleton that doesn't look all that appealing. But being able to use sort of larger parts allows you to kind of cover up a lot of gaps more. And kind of doing that on a skinnier mock may actually just create more gaps. If you have that sort of, some of those bulkier parts on there, it might actually hinder it rather than improve it. So yeah, using it on a bigger mock is really lends itself to using some parts that maybe are harder to use because they're bigger. Like I know I have that. I have a bunch of huge parts, like even Mutter torsos or Hero Factory shells like that just kind of sit there. But using it on a bigger mock, you're able to kind of finally give them a use. And I think that really lends itself to this body type. Just a fun little detail that I really like that kind of continues some of the texture that we have up there on the top with those Borak shells. So there's a sort of system slope there on the bottom of the foot, which is awesome to really play around with texture there. And also really great use of system. It looks fantastic, really shapes that foot design. If we look at the back of the mock, it's also using a bunch of pistons, which I think lends itself to having the bulkier design. Given that it's bulkier and everything, there's often going to be kind of like broader shoulders and a lot of sort of weight on the mock that you may not get with a smaller, slimmer build. And yeah, using some pistons, whether it's the actual piston piece or even like we see on the back here, using a lot of sort of sockets and stuff to act as pistons as well, would be really, really beneficial to have the mock actually hold itself up more, and would also help posability and yeah, just generally be very helpful. And a lot of Titan builds that we see from the actual official LEGO sets did use pistons, so yeah, it's often quite beneficial to do that. Not always as easy to do, but it is normally quite simple, as you can see here, just sort of connecting the piston to the foot and then another part of the leg, or connecting, essentially that, isn't it? Connecting one part of the limb to another part of the body is pretty much all you need to do. And it could even be that if, as you're building, you slowly are having parts sort of fall over on top of themselves, maybe adding a piston in there would be a really good way to sort of counteract that. Another fun thing that we definitely have to talk about is this fantastic weapon here, this big sort of, oh man, what's it called? What's it called? Is it a ratchet, a screwdriver? Man, I'm going to get slaughtered for this. I'm sorry, I don't know what it's called. Correct me in the comments. But having that really fun weapon there, and then also him in this really awesome pose, really adds a lot of character to that. Oh, I feel so bad for not knowing what that tool is called. Ah, dang. Anyway, really cool, especially because it's built out of system as well. A very unique weapon that you don't normally see. And having bigger, bulkier mocks like that allows you definitely to play around with more weapons and make freaking huge things, which technically you could even have on a skinnier mock as long as it can hold it up. But even if it can't hold it up, you may as well try it anyway. You could always give it a stand or something. But yeah, I think that looks fantastic and really adds a lot more character to this mock. One more thing as well about Keat Orange is a lot of the parts in Keat Orange often are quite big. You got some of these shin guards there and like the Keat Orange Borak shells that we were talking about before. A lot of the parts are just naturally bigger. So even using a color that naturally has a lot of larger pieces in it would be more beneficial to use, I guess. I don't know how to word it, but yeah, it would kind of lend itself to a larger mock. So a really fun, fantastic mock from Aero Oken or Paitski Tongu, which really represents a sort of bulkier style very well, in my opinion. So fantastic work, Aero. The final mock we have today is by Alera or Molly Ray, and it's called Famine. This mock uses, honestly, in my opinion, one of the most difficult pieces to use in the history of Lego, and it is the Lego planet pieces. This one specifically is the Tatooine planet from the little Tatooine planet Star Wars sets. Those of you who don't know, they were a series that they no longer do anymore, but they essentially gave you a little mini Star Wars build and a minifigure and then a larger planet of all the different planets from Star Wars. And so this was obviously Tatooine, and there were some other ones for like Naboo and Hoth and stuff like that. And some of them were really helpful in a sense for mocking, like there was one of the Death Star, which had a really sort of cool like space texture, and a lot of people used them on like space mocks and stuff. But there's some like Naboo and even Tatooine, which have really odd textures and colors to them that I don't even know how you'd begin to use it on a mock, you know? But ironically, having such a difficult to use part has actually inspired a lot of people to use them in such awesome and creative ways, and this is definitely an example of that. So Molly has sort of challenged the general stereotype of very, skinny mock or a very buff-looking mock or a, very toned, muscular mock, and gone with a sort of larger build, kind of giving it a more natural aesthetic. So it's a fantastic piece used to use the planet set in that regard. Another thing that I really like about it is because there's maybe 3-4 colors on that planet set, and ironically, Molly's been able to repeat that throughout the mock and actually create a very well-rounded, beautiful-looking color scheme. Kind of using all the different shades of brown and tan and all that. All the colors quite work well together and flow nicely. And often there's a sort of like quote-unquote rules that people use of, like you can't have more than 1 or 2 colors on a mock. It just doesn't work. And technically, there's maybe 3 or 4 different, maybe even 5 colors here that actually work really well together because they are just different tones and different shades of, brown in a way. And so it actually works and flows very nicely. There's also a really, really cool weapon here, which again sort of lends itself to the overall shape of the mock. Just it being larger, you can have a much larger weapon, that sort of thing. If you gave it a little tiny dagger, I suppose it could work, but kind of the overall size of a mock often, in a way, I guess, reflects the weapon. But yeah, I think what Molly's done with this mock is very creative and very clever to really challenge the body shape of a mock. Go with something that you really don't see every day on a mock. And I think that's an awesome job. But yeah, I think Molly's done a fantastic job. It's a very well built, very creative, clever mock. So that about does it for today's body shapes themed episode. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. If you have any mocks that you yourself have built or that your friends have built, be sure to check the links in the description, and you can send me a message through the personal messaging systems on all those links. Just be sure to say that you want it in the series. Sometimes I've had a few people just send me a mock, and I'm like, I don't know if you are just showing me this, or if you actually want it on the show. Be sure to let me know. Otherwise, as well, be sure to check the links in the description for links to the mocks that you saw in today's episode, and be sure to check out some of the other builds from the people that you saw today. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed the episode. Happy building. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.